could only smell the hairs on the back of the man's neck, see the neat line of his collar, the redness on the tops of his ears, could only feel himself harder than before, as though his body were concentrating itself, straining in that one spot. Surely he could feel it. John felt panicked. Sweat collected in his armpits. He dreaded the man succeeding in pivoting about, skewering the other passengers with his elbows, shouting something, the carriage turning its eyes, a gap opening around his telltale shame. And yet he knew he did not want it to stop, that he could not escape the grip of this terrible excitement. The man began to move. At first John was not certain. He thought again that it might be the jolting of the train. He had been willing the hardness away, counting from 100 in his head, breathing slowly through his teeth, when he felt the slightest movement, as though the man were pushing back against his erection, as though he were gently tilting against it, rising and falling on his toes. John's first sensation was a rush of dread, followed quickly by a rush of something else, that same high, vanishing feeling running through his fingers and up to his temples. He had no control. He was crowded on all sides. He was fixed at the centre of a mass of bodies, his entire consciousness constricted, committed to this small circle of subtle movement. This man's buttocks, pressed so tightly against him it almost hurt, moving up and down. A bead of sweat, released from his armpit, ran quickly and coldly down his side. He tried to look about him, at the other passengers, but could not. Instead, he gazed frantically, surrenderingly at the man's collar, the redness on his ears. Was that a smile, creeping to the edge of the moustache? And still it went on, unmistakable now, the rising and falling, the pressure, almost painful, moving up the length of him, to the tip and down again. He breathed heavily through his nose, breathed heavily onto the man's neck. He wished he could move his arms, that he could move anything at all, that his whole being were not bent so terrifyingly on this sensation, this experience, that he could for a moment place himself outside it. He breathed heavily again, saw how his breath flattened the whitish hairs on the back of the man's neck. His face hurt. He felt a strange pressure under his ears. He swallowed, took another breath. Pomade and eau de cologne, cigarette smoke, salt. Up and down. The pressure dragged painfully to the tip, down again. He was sinking under it. He could barely breathe. The train slowed. They were coming to a stop. He gasped onto the man's neck. He longed for escape, for it to be over. Up and down, pleasure lancing through his body. The light changed. He saw over the man's shoulder the brighter lights of the platform. He tried to step backwards, could not yet. He heard the doors being opened, heard the aggravated noise of the platform, waited for the pressure to ease, for movement in the carriage, for people to depart. He longed to turn his head. But more people were pouring in, more darkness, black pressure, umbrellas, canes, satchels, dresses, coats. He and the man were forced even closer than before. He could feel the full warmth of the man's body, the climbing curve of his back, his shoulders braced against his. And his lips were nudged into the man's neck. He felt the hairs on his lips, tasted the pomade and the eau de cologne. The man was still tilting against him. They were moving together now in a slow, crushed dance, rising and falling in time. The train pushed off. The lights quivered. It was unbearably hot. He felt faint-headed, almost in pain, and then he felt the man's hand, a hand unbuttoned.